The mining moon of Kerith was a place where the wind never slept. It howled across endless plains of black rock, carrying fine silver dust that stung the eyes and clung to every surface. The sky was always dim, lit by the pale glow of a distant sun and the shimmering light from the nearby gas giant. Life here was not easy. Only the strong, the tough, and the useful survived. Lyra and Sarah were not considered any of those things. They were twins, born into a colony that measured worth by muscle and endurance. Every colonist had a purpose, digging in the deep shafts, for ore, maintaining the heavy machinery, or carrying supplies through the storm. Those who could not work were a burden, and in the eyes of the colony's leaders, Lyra and Sarah were just that. They were small and light, with fragile hands better suited for gentle tasks than lifting metal crates. Lyra loved stories and drawing shapes in the dust, while Sarah preferred to watch the sky and count the stars when the clouds cleared. Their quiet, thoughtful nature made them stand out, and not in a good way. When the mines collapsed after weeks of unstable tremors, the colony had no choice but to abandon Kerith. The evacuation was quick and ruthless. The leaders decided who boarded the shuttles first: the strongest workers, the engineers, the fighters. Everyone else had to wait for possible later retrieval. For Lyra and Sarah, that retrieval never came. The shuttles lifted off in clouds of dust, leaving behind empty platforms and the distant roar of engines fading into the sky. The twins stood there, clutching each other's hands, their silver hair whipped by the wind. The cold began to bite into their thin coats, and their hearts pounded with the terrible realization they had been left. Hours passed. The storms grew, heavier. The fine dust turned into shards of ice carried on the wind. The twins searched for shelter and found the wreck of an old cargo hauler near the abandoned loading bay. Its hull was cracked and half buried in dust, but inside, it was at least out of the wind. They curled up in a corner of the dark, metal shell. Lyra kept her arms around Sarah, who trembled and tried not to cry. There was no food, no light, and only the faint warmth of their shared body heat. Outside, the storm's voice grew louder, the wind howling like some unseen beast circling its prey. The first night was the worst. They could hear the distant groaning of metal structures bending under the storm's force. Every now and then, a sharp bang echoed through the air, something heavy being torn loose and thrown across the rocky ground. Sarah whispered that maybe the colony would return in the morning. Lyra nodded but didn't speak. Deep down, she didn't believe it. By the second day, their stomachs ached with hunger. Lyra found a cracked storage box in the cargo hauler's corner, but it held nothing but a few broken tools. They took turns peeking outside, hoping to see lights in the sky, but there was only the endless gray of the storm. The sisters spoke quietly to keep each other awake. Lyra told Sarah stories she remembered from old books, about ships that sailed across oceans, about cities filled with music, about people who helped strangers without expecting anything in return. Sarah listened and tried to imagine such places, even though she had never left Kerith. On the third night, the storm turned into something worse. The wind screamed so loud that it felt like the air itself was trying to tear the hauler apart. Dust and ice forced their way through cracks in the metal. The twins huddled together, teeth chattering, eyes wide with fear. Lyra pressed her hand over Sarah's ears to block out the noise, but it was useless. The storm was everywhere. In the middle of that chaos, Lyra thought she heard something different. A low hum, faint and far away. At first, she thought it was the wind playing tricks on her, but then it grew louder, steadier. She crawled to a small gap in the hull and looked out. Through the swirling dust, she saw a light. Not the cold, flickering blue of electrical sparks, but a warm, steady beam cutting through the darkness. It moved slowly, sweeping the ground as if searching for something. "Sarah," Lyra whispered urgently. There's something out there. Her sister crawled beside her and peered through the gap. The light was closer now, and behind it, a shape began to emerge. A small ship, its engines glowing faintly under layers of dust and ice. It was flying low, too low for a normal patrol. The twins' hearts began to race. No ship had passed this way since the colony left. Whoever it was, they weren't supposed to be here. The ship hovered above the ground, its searchlight sweeping over the abandoned loading bay. Lyra's breath caught when the light passed over the wreck they were hiding in. For a moment it lingered there, then moved away. "They didn't see us," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking with disappointment. But then the ship turned. Slowly it circled back, the beam of light locking onto the hauler once more. This time, it didn't move away. The hum of the engines grew louder until it was right above them. A moment later, there was a hiss of pressurized air and the clang of metal against metal, the sound of a docking ramp extending. Lyra and Sarah stared at each other, hardly daring to breathe. Their minds raced. Was this rescue, or something worse? No one ever came back to Kerith without a reason, and the twins had nothing worth taking. Footsteps echoed inside the wreck, heavy and deliberate. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, framed by the glare of the storm behind him. His suit was thick and reinforced, the kind used by humans for high-risk environments. A clear visor showed a man's face, weathered, focused, and scanning the darkness. When his eyes found the twins, they froze. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, the man took a slow step forward and knelt to their level. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice calm but carrying a note of disbelief. "How long have you been alone?" Lyra opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Sarah clutched her sister's hand tighter. The man's gaze softened. "It's all right. You're safe now." He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a thermal blanket, draping it over them. Warmth spread instantly through their shivering bodies. The twins couldn't understand why this stranger cared when their own people had left them behind. "Let's get you out of here," he said, his tone firm, like someone used to giving orders. And just like that, for the first time since the shuttles left, hope flickered inside the twins' hearts. The man's name was Commander Jason Hale. At least, that was what the small badge on his chest plate said when the twins finally gathered enough courage to glance at it. He was human, one of the rare visitors their colony had only ever seen, from a distance. Jason spoke through his helmet's comm unit, his voice calm and steady despite the storm shaking the walls of the wreck around them. "We need to move. The storm's going to get worse in the next 30 minutes. Lyra and Sarah didn't move at first. They still couldn't believe he was real, someone who had come back to this moon after everyone else had left. Jason lowered himself so he was at eye level with them again. His visor reflected their pale, frightened faces. "I'm not here to hurt you. I was sweeping the sector for life signs before the storm makes it impossible. I didn't expect to find—" He paused, glancing between them. "You." Outside, the wind howled like it wanted to tear the ship apart. A loud metallic crash somewhere nearby made the twins flinch. Jason extended his gloved hand toward them. "Come on, my shuttle's close. You can't stay here." Lyra looked at Sarah. Her sister's large, luminous eyes were full of fear, but there was also trust. Trust in Lyra to decide. Lyra hesitated for only a moment before taking Jason's hand. Sarah clung to her other hand as they followed him out, into the storm. The cold hit them instantly, sharp as blades. Dust and ice swirled so thick they could barely see more than a few steps ahead. Jason moved quickly, guiding them toward a dark shape in the distance. His shuttle. Its engines glowed, faintly, the only warm color in the endless gray. By the time they reached it, Lyra's legs felt like they were made of stone. Sarah stumbled once, but Jason caught her without breaking stride. He hit a panel on the side of the shuttle, and the ramp lowered with a hiss. Warm air spilled out, and the twins stumbled inside. The interior was small but bright compared to the storm outside. Jason sealed the door and removed his helmet, revealing short, dark hair and a face lined with the kind of weariness that comes from years of dangerous work. He took off his gloves and quickly activated the shuttle's heating system. "Sit," he said gently, pointing to a padded bench. The twins obeyed, still shivering under the blanket he'd given them. Jason busied himself at a console, running scans and tapping commands. Lyra's eyes wandered around the cabin. Everything looked strange and advanced compared to the crude equipment back in the colony. Sleek panels, softly glowing screens, and a faint hum from somewhere deep in the walls. She noticed a small emblem on one of the displays, a blue and silver crest with a star at its center. Jason noticed her looking. "Earth Alliance," he explained, "Search and Rescue Division." The words meant little to the twins, but his tone was one of quiet pride. Why are you here?" Lyra finally asked, her voice weak. Jason glanced over his shoulder. "Because someone has to check the places everyone else forgets." He returned to his console, but his voice softened. "I was ordered to do one last sweep before the storm made this place unreachable. I was about to turn back when I caught your life signs." Sarah tilted her head. "No one comes back here." Jason nodded grimly. "I know." He turned off the main engines and let the shuttle hover on auto stabilizers. "I also know whoever left you here didn't plan on returning." The silence that followed was heavy. The twins lowered their eyes, not wanting to talk about the colony or the cold, blunt way they had been abandoned. Jason didn't push them. Instead, he went to a storage compartment and retrieved 2 sealed packs. He tore one open, revealing a warm, soft bar of nutrient food. He handed it to Lyra, then gave another to Sarah. "Eat. Slowly. Your bodies need time to adjust." The twins obeyed, taking small bites. The food was plain but rich compared to anything they'd eaten before. Lyra could feel her strength returning with each mouthful. While they ate, Jason checked the storm's readings. The display showed a swirling mass of red and white over the moon's surface. "We'll need to wait until it eases up before making the jump to orbit," he said. "If I try now, the winds could tear us apart." Lyra swallowed and asked quietly, "Where will you take us?" Jason leaned against the console. "I have a base ship in orbit. From there, I can get you to a safe outpost. You won't have to stay on this moon." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Safe means no one will leave us again?" Jason looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Safe means you'll have a choice. No one should decide your worth for you." The twins exchanged a glance. Those words were strange, almost impossible to believe. In the colony, worth had always been decided for them. For the next hour, the shuttle rocked gently as the storm outside raged on. Jason moved around the cabin with calm efficiency, checking systems, securing loose equipment, and occasionally glancing at the twins to make sure they were all right. At one point, the shuttle's sensors beeped. Jason's expression hardened. He tapped a screen, and a faint blip appeared on the radar. "That's not good," he muttered. Lyra leaned forward. "What is it?" "Another ship," Jason replied. "Small, fast, not Alliance." His jaw tightened. "If they're down, here in this weather, they're not here to help." The twins' stomachs tightened with fear. "Who?" Sarah asked. Jason didn't answer right away. "Could be scavengers. Could be someone who doesn't want witnesses to what happened here." He looked at them directly. "Either way, you're safer with me than out there." The beeping grew louder. Jason sat in the pilot's seat and powered up the engines. "Change of plan. The storm's bad, but staying here is worse." The shuttle lifted off, its thrusters cutting through the thick air. Outside, the world was a blur of gray and silver, the storm clawing at the hull. Jason kept his focus steady, hands gripping the controls. The blip on the radar began to move faster. Whoever was out there had noticed them. Lyra and Sarah clutched each other, their eyes fixed on the strange symbols dancing across the navigation screen. Jason's voice came over the comm again, steady and reassuring. "Hold on! We're getting out of here!" The shuttle banked hard, skimming just above the jagged surface of Kerith. The radar blip followed. Jason's gaze flicked between the terrain ahead and the readings. For the first time since meeting him, the twins saw a flicker of tension in his eyes. But there was no hesitation, only determination. And as the storm swallowed the world outside, the twins began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a real chance of leaving this dead moon alive. The shuttle cut through the gray storm like a dart, but the radar screen told Jason the truth. The unknown ship was still behind them, closing the distance bit by bit. Jason's hands moved quickly over the controls. He didn't panic, but his eyes stayed sharp. "They're faster than I thought," he murmured to himself. Then, louder to the twins. "Stay seated. We'll need to ride this storm until we can break line of sight." Lyra held Sarah's hand tightly. Sarah's gaze stayed locked on the small blip on the radar that represented their pursuer. "Why are they following us?" she asked. Jason didn't turn. "Because some people don't like witnesses, and sometimes they're just after whatever they think you have." The twins looked at each other. They had nothing. No valuables, no tools, nothing but the thin clothes on their backs. But they both understood. Sometimes people didn't need a reason to harm others. The shuttle shook violently as the wind caught one side. Jason corrected it with a quick maneuver, then dropped their altitude lower than the twins thought possible. Now they were weaving through jagged rock formations that rose out of the ground like giant black teeth. The storm winds whistled through the stone spires, and the shuttle's engines roared as Jason pushed it harder. "This will give us some cover," Jason said, "but it's risky. One wrong move and we'll scrape the hull." Sarah swallowed hard. Lyra kept her eyes on the view ahead, trying to understand the patterns in Jason's movements. She could tell he wasn't just flying. He was reading the storm, reacting to it in ways she didn't understand. Minutes passed, each one tense. The blip on the radar wavered, sometimes fading, then reappearing. Jason finally gave a short nod. "We've put some distance between us." The shuttle leveled out slightly, and the noise of the engines eased. For the first time since takeoff, the twins let out a breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. Jason glanced over his shoulder. "You two all right?" Lyra nodded slowly. Sarah gave a small, quiet yes. Jason tapped a switch, locking the shuttle into a semi-stable autopilot. Then he stood and went to check on them. "Storm flying takes a lot out of a ship," he explained, crouching so they could hear him better over the hum. "We'll need to wait until we're clear before I make the jump to orbit." Sarah tilted her head. "Jump? It's how we leave a place like this quickly," Jason said. "Faster than light travel. But it needs stable conditions, and this moon isn't giving us any of those right now." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Then we're still in danger." Jason didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "That's why you need to stay close to me until we're out of this system." The twins exchanged another glance. Staying close to him, that was something they could do. The shuttle rocked slightly and Jason moved to the main controls again. But now, with the immediate danger slightly less, the cabin felt different. Lyra found herself watching Jason more closely. His movements were precise, almost instinctive. Every button he pressed, every adjustment he made, to the controls was confident, like he had done it 1,000 times before. "Do humans always come to dangerous places?" Lyra asked suddenly. Jason's mouth curved into a faint smile, though his eyes stayed on the screens. Not always. Most of us avoid them, but some go because someone has to. Sarah shifted in her seat. And you're one of them. Jason's smile widened just a little. Guess I am. A soft beeping from a side panel interrupted them. Jason leaned over to check it, then frowned. Your temperatures are still low, he said. You've been out in that cold too long. He retrieved 2 thermal flasks from a compartment and handed them over. Drink. It's just warm nutrient tea. Helps with the shivers. The twins took the flasks, wrapping their cold hands around them. The heat seeped into their fingers, and for the first time since meeting Jason, they both began to relax. Lyra sipped carefully. Why help us? She asked after a moment. Jason didn't answer right away. He stared out at the swirling storm, beyond the glass. Because I've seen too many people left behind when they didn't deserve it. I can't save everyone, but I can save someone. His words hung in the air, warm in their simplicity. Sarah looked down at her tea, her voice barely above a whisper. No one has said that to us before. Jason didn't respond with more words. He just nodded slightly and returned his focus to the controls. As the minutes turned into an hour, the storm began to thin. The gray haze outside grew lighter, and the sharp edges of the terrain became clearer. Jason's posture changed subtly, more ready, more focused. Almost there, he said. Once we clear this ridge, we'll be able to climb for orbit. But before they could reach the ridge, the radar lit up again. The blip had returned, closer than before. Jason cursed under his breath and gripped the controls. They must have been waiting for us to come out of cover. The twins' hearts raced as the shuttle's engines roared again. Jason didn't hesitate. He turned the craft sharply and dove into a narrow canyon between 2 ridges. The walls rushed past so close that Lyra swore she could have reached out and touched them. Hold tight, Jason called. The shuttle twisted through the canyon like a leaf in a river, the storm winds funneling them forward. The pursuing ship followed, but Jason was already adjusting their path, leading them toward a sharp turn. At the last second, he banked hard, and the shuttle shot upward through a narrow gap in the rock. The pursuing blip vanished from the radar. Jason exhaled. That should slow them down. Lyra leaned forward. How did you know that gap was there? Jason gave a small grin. I've been flying in storms since I was younger than you. You learn to spot places like that. The storm was fading quickly now, and above them, the blackness of space began to peek through. Jason powered up the jump drive. Get ready. Once we're out of the atmosphere, we're leaving this place behind. The twins didn't speak. They just watched as the sky went from gray to deep blue to the star-filled black of space. The moment. The turbulence eased. Jason engaged the jump. The stars stretched into bright lines, and then silence. Smooth, endless silence. The storm, the cold, the fear. It all fell away, replaced by the gentle hum of the ship in faster-than-light travel. Jason leaned back in his chair. We've got a little breathing room now. The twins sat quietly, still holding their flasks. For the first time, they didn't feel like they were just passengers. Somehow, they felt like they were part of something bigger. The stars outside Jason's shuttle looked calm, almost peaceful. But Jason's eyes stayed locked on the navigation screen, and the way his jaw tightened told the twins that peace was an illusion. They're still back there, he said quietly. Lyra leaned forward. But we jumped. Jason nodded. We did. But whoever's chasing us, they have a faster ship than I thought. They must have calculated our jump vector and followed. Sarah's grip on Lyra's sleeve tightened. Then, they won't stop. Not unless we give them a reason to, Jason replied. He didn't sound frightened, but his voice carried the weight of someone who had been in this kind of situation before. "We can't outrun them forever. We need to lose them for good." The console beeped sharply, drawing Jason's attention. A small red dot appeared behind them on the radar, slowly but steadily closing the distance. Jason tapped a few commands, and a holographic projection of the local space appeared. Clusters of asteroids, drifting debris, and one large, spinning field of shattered metal. He pointed at it. "This is our chance. The debris field is dangerous. Too much scrap metal, unstable wreckage, and magnetic pockets. But it can also hide us." Lyra studied the map. "Like the rocks back on the moon." Jason glanced at her with a faint smile. "Exactly, but this time the scale is bigger, and the dangers are worse." The shuttle banked toward the field, and the stars outside shifted. Soon the view was filled with drifting shapes, broken ship hulls, twisted beams, and giant shards of metal spinning slowly in the dark, the remains of battles long past. Jason's hands moved quickly on the controls. "I'll need your help," he said suddenly. The twins blinked at him. "Our help?" Lyra asked. "Yes. Sarah, take that seat beside me. Watch the proximity sensors. If anything gets too close, warn me immediately. Lyra, keep your eyes on the magnetic readings. If we hit a strong pull, I'll need to adjust course instantly." The girls hesitated for only a moment before moving into position. The controls were strange, but Jason's instructions were clear. They entered the debris field, and instantly the quiet of space turned into a world of motion. Massive pieces of broken ships drifted past, some larger than the shuttle itself. Panels and cables spun like silent ghosts in the void. Every so often, a faint glimmer of light reflected off polished metal, making it look like stars were trapped. "Inside the wrecks! Object on the left!" Sarah called suddenly. Jason shifted the shuttle just enough to avoid a collision with a spinning engine core. It passed so close that Lyra could see scorch marks on its surface. "Magnetic spike ahead," Lyra warned, eyes on her screen. Jason adjusted course again, skimming just outside the pull of a massive, jagged hull fragment. "Good work," he said, his voice calm but approving. "Keep it up." For a few tense minutes, it seemed to work. The radar blip that marked their pursuer disappeared behind the debris. But just as relief began to creep in, Sarah spotted movement. "Jason, there!" Through a gap in the wreckage, the pursuing ship slid into view, its dark hull blending with the shadows. It was bigger than Jason's shuttle, sleeker, and clearly built for speed. "They're stubborn," Jason muttered. "All right. Time to give them something to think about." He steered sharply toward a cluster of wrecks tangled together. At the last second, he slipped between them, weaving through tight spaces that no larger ship could safely navigate. Sparks flickered outside as bits of debris scraped against the shuttle's shields. The larger ship tried to follow, but the gap was too narrow. It slowed, circling around to find another path. "That's our window," Jason said. "Hang on!" The shuttle surged forward, diving deeper into the field. Lyra and Sarah worked without hesitation now, calling out dangers before they appeared. Jason's movements became faster, sharper, as he steered through paths that twisted like a maze. Every few seconds he checked the radar. The pursuing blip kept falling further behind. But then a new alert flashed across the console. Energy spike detected. Jason's eyes narrowed. "They're firing!" A bright flash lit the darkness, and a bolt of energy ripped through the debris. Behind them, shards of metal exploded outward, spinning dangerously close. "Hold tight!" Jason called as he spun the shuttle hard to the right, narrowly avoiding a huge piece of wreckage tumbling toward them. The chase became a deadly dance. Jason twisting through wreckage, the girls shouting warnings, and the enemy trying to get a clear shot. Finally, Jason spotted what he needed, a massive, hollow section of a destroyed cruiser. Its outer hull was torn wide open, revealing a tunnel-like interior big enough for his shuttle. "We're going inside," he said. The twins didn't question him. The shuttle shot forward and slipped through the gap, entering the shadowy tunnel. The walls were lined with broken pipes and hanging cables. Dim emergency lights flickered weakly, as if the ship's power still clung to life after all these years. The enemy ship tried to follow, but the gap was too tight for its wider frame. Instead, it began circling outside. Jason slowed the shuttle to a silent drift inside the hollow wreck. He powered down all non-essential systems, dimming the lights until the cabin was bathed in soft shadow. "We'll hide here until they give up," he whispered. For a while, they sat in near silence. Only the faint hum of life support broke the quiet. Lyra and Sarah kept their eyes on the radar, watching the enemy ship move slowly outside the wreck. Sarah finally whispered, "What if they don't leave?" Jason's eyes were on the display, but his voice stayed steady. "Then we make them think we already did." He tapped a few commands, and the shuttle's secondary systems began sending faint engine signatures in the opposite direction. A decoy. Minutes. Later, the radar showed the enemy ship turning to follow the false trail. Slowly, its blip faded into the distance. Jason let out a slow breath. "That's more like it." When he finally powered the shuttle back up, the twins looked at him with wide eyes. "You trusted us," Lyra said quietly. Jason glanced at her. "Of course I did. You were part of the reason we made it through that in one piece." Sarah tilted, her head almost shyly. "We helped you," Jason gave a small, warm smile. "You did more than help. You proved you're worth more than what anyone back on that moon thought." The twins exchanged a look, a spark of something new in their eyes. Not just survival, but belonging. As the shuttle eased out of the wreck and back into open space, the storm of the chase faded into the quiet hum of travel. For the first time, the twins weren't just passengers, they were crew. The shuttle glided through the emptiness of space, but Jason's focus stayed sharp. The enemy might have been tricked by the decoy, but he knew it wouldn't last forever. Ships like that didn't give up easily. Lyra and Sarah sat near the control panels, watching Jason's every move. The quiet between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was a steady silence, the kind that came when everyone knew their part in what was coming next. Jason finally spoke. "We can't keep running. They'll track us again sooner or later. This time, we're going to end it." The twins leaned forward. Sarah asked, "End it? How?" Jason tapped the screen, bringing up a new map of the system. A swirling orange. Mass glowed at the edge. A plasma storm. It churned like a living thing, its currents moving in unpredictable waves. "We can't fight them directly," Jason said. "Their ship is faster and better armed. But the plasma storm, it's chaos. If we lure them in, they'll be fighting the storm, not us." Lyra frowned. "Isn't that dangerous for us too?" Jason's gaze met hers. "Very. But if we plan it right, we'll be out before they know what happened." He zoomed in on the map, showing a narrow corridor through the storm. "There's a safe channel here. It's unstable, but I've flown through worse. I'll need both of you to help me find the path. If the storm shifts, we'll have seconds to react." Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. "We can do it." Lyra nodded. "Tell us what to do." Jason smiled faintly. "All right. Lyra, you'll track. The magnetic surges. If a wave is coming, I need to know before it hits us. Sarah, you'll watch the ion levels. Too high, and it means lightning strikes are building." The twins moved to their stations, their fingers hovering over the controls. Hours later, the plasma storm came into view. Even from a distance, it was terrifying, a shifting sea of fire and lightning, its colors dancing in gold, orange, and deep red. Rivers of energy flowed through it, twisting and breaking apart like molten threads. The moment they entered the storm's edge, the shuttle shook violently. Sparks danced across the shields, and warning lights flickered. Jason's voice was calm. Steady. Just like we practiced. Lyra scanned her display. Magnetic spike. Right side 30 degrees. Jason adjusted course and the shuttle slid between two glowing waves of plasma. The heat shimmered outside, so bright it was like flying into a furnace. Sarah's eyes darted over her screen. Ion levels rising, front left. Jason banked sharply, and a massive bolt of plasma lightning cracked through the space they had been moments earlier. Good catch, Jason said, keeping his voice even. As they pushed deeper into the storm, the radar lit up. The enemy ship had found them again. It followed, weaving into the storm's edge. Jason's jaw tightened. They took the bait. The enemy's sleek hull cut through the plasma waves, but it was clear they were struggling to keep a steady course. The storm tossed them back and forth, and small flashes on their shields showed they were taking hits. Now we just keep them close enough to think they can catch us, Jason said. Lyra kept calling out magnetic surges, and Sarah tracked dangerous ion spikes. Jason steered with precision, each movement weaving them deeper into the safe channel. The enemy ship followed, unaware that they were being led toward the storm's most violent heart. A deep rumble echoed through the shuttle, a shockwave from the storm's core. Jason glanced at his readings. We're almost at the turning point. Once we hit the central current, I'll need both of you ready. The twins nodded, their eyes locked on their screens. Suddenly, the safe channel narrowed ahead. Plasma waves crashed together like colliding oceans. Lyra shouted, "Magnetic wave incoming, huge one!" Jason gritted his teeth. Hold on! The shuttle shot upward, just skimming over the wave's crest before it collapsed behind them. The enemy ship, heavier and less agile, plowed straight into it. Their shields flared bright, and their speed dropped sharply. They're slowing, Sarah said. Not enough, Jason replied. We need one final push. The central current roared into view, a massive swirling vortex of plasma, its surface sparking with constant lightning. Jason pointed ahead. That's it. We'll skim the edge, then cut hard to the side. The storm will drag them in. Lyra's voice was firm. Tell us when. Jason counted down, eyes fixed on the swirling chaos. 3, 2, 1. Now, Lyra called out the magnetic drop, and Jason yanked the controls. The shuttle tilted sharply, shooting out of the current's pull just in time. Behind them, the enemy tried to follow, but the shift came too late. The vortex caught their ship like a giant hand pulling them under. Energy waves slammed into their hull, and the radar showed their blip spinning helplessly deeper into the storm. Jason didn't slow. We're not staying to watch. Let's get clear before this storm decides we're next. Minutes later, they burst out of the storm into open space. The sudden quiet felt unreal after the constant roar and flashing light. Jason leaned back, exhaling slowly. We did it. Lyra's face lit up. We did it together. Sarah gave a small, tired smile. We're not just cargo anymore. Jason looked at them, his expression softening. No, you're crew now. You've proven you can handle yourself when it matters. The twins exchanged a glance, this time not of fear, but of pride. They had been left behind as useless. Now they had helped win a fight without firing a single shot. The shuttle settled into a steady course toward Jason's base ship. Outside, the stars seemed brighter, sharper, as if the universe had opened a little wider for them. Jason adjusted the controls, but his voice was lighter than before. Once we reach the station, you'll have choices. You can stay there, start fresh, or if you want, keep flying with me. Lyra and Sarah didn't answer right away. They simply looked out at the stars, the corners of their mouths turning upward, because for the first time in their lives, they knew, whatever choice they made, it would be their choice. The stars drifted slowly outside the shuttle's windows, glowing like tiny lanterns scattered across the endless dark. After hours of silence, The hum of the engines had become almost comforting. For Lyra and Sarah, the fear and cold of Kerith felt like a distant memory, though not one they would ever forget. Jason sat at the pilot's seat, guiding them toward the distant glimmer of his base ship. On the main display, the large vessel appeared as a silver crescent floating against the black, its running lights pulsing softly. "There she is," Jason said, a faint smile in his voice. "Home." Lyra leaned forward. "That's your ship?" "One of them," Jason replied. "But this one has a good crew, honest people, and they don't judge someone's worth before giving them a chance." Sarah's eyes softened at that. "Then it's nothing like the colony." Jason's gaze met hers for a moment before he turned back to the controls. "Nothing at all." As the shuttle approached, docking clamps extended from the base ship, guiding them gently into a secure bay. The moment the engines powered down, the hatch hissed open. Warm, fresh air rushed in, carrying a faint scent of metal and something sweeter, like baked bread. The twins followed Jason down the ramp and into the docking bay. The floor was smooth and clean, and the walls gleamed under bright lights. Crew members moved about, some unloading cargo, others checking tools. A tall woman with short silver hair approached, her uniform marked with the same Earth Alliance crest Jason wore. "Rescue run?" she asked, glancing at the twins. Jason nodded. "Found them on Kerith, left behind during the evacuation." The woman's expression softened. "Then they're lucky you were there." She looked at the twins and gave a small nod of welcome before moving on. Lyra and Sarah exchanged a quick glance. They weren't used to strangers speaking to them without suspicion or harshness. Jason led them through wide corridors, pointing out different sections of the ship. The medbay, the mess hall, the observation deck. Everything felt new and overwhelming. There was no dust, no bitter wind, no constant sense of being unwanted. When they reached the mess hall, Jason stopped. "Get something to eat. Real food this time. I have to file the rescue report, but I'll be back." The twins hesitated, but he gave them a reassuring nod before heading off. Inside, the mess hall was bright and full of chatter. The scent of warm bread and stew filled the air. A young man at the counter noticed them and smiled. "First time here? Try this." He handed them each a steaming bowl and a slice of bread. They sat together at a corner table, tasting the food slowly. It was richer and warmer than anything they had ever eaten. The warmth seemed to sink all the way to their bones. "This place feels different," Sarah whispered. Lyra nodded. "Safe." When Jason returned, they had nearly finished eating. He sat across from them. "All right, you have two choices now. You can stay here on the base ship until we find a colony willing to take you in, or—" He paused, looking at each of them. "You can stay with me. I could use crew members who think fast under pressure." The twins didn't answer right away. They looked at each other, the unspoken question passing between them. "Do we dare?" Sarah was the first to speak. "If we stay here, would we still see you?" Jason gave a small smile. "Probably, but not as much as if you were flying with me." Lyra's voice was steady when she said, "Then we want to stay with you." Jason didn't hide the pride in his expression. "All right, then you're officially part of my crew." The words felt heavier than they sounded, not heavy with burden, but with meaning. For the first time in their lives, Lyra and Sarah weren't being taken along because someone felt sorry for them. They were being chosen. Later, Jason took them to the shuttle bay where his smaller personal craft was docked. "If you're going to fly with me, you need to know your way around a ship," he said. For the next hour, he showed them each control, each safety measure, each place where quick thinking could mean survival. He didn't talk down to them, didn't treat them like they couldn't understand. Sarah learned how to read navigation patterns. Lyra learned how to adjust shield power in emergencies. Every time they made a correct move, Jason gave them a short nod or a few words of encouragement. That night, though night was only a word here in the endless dark of space. The twins stood at the observation deck. The glass stretched high above them, showing an unbroken sea of stars. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," Lyra said quietly. Sarah leaned on the railing. "I never thought we'd even leave Kareth." Jason joined them, standing a step behind. "Space has a way of surprising you. One day you're in the worst place you can imagine. And the next, you're somewhere you didn't think was possible." Lyra turned to him. "Thank you for not leaving us." Jason's reply was simple, but it carried weight. "I don't leave people behind." In the weeks that followed, the twins settled into their new roles. They learned to run system checks, assist with navigation, and even handle basic repairs. The crew grew used to seeing them in the corridors, and soon enough, Lyra and Sarah were not just the rescued twins. They were Lyra and Sarah, valued members of the team. They still carried the memory of Kareth, the cold, the abandonment, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it reminded them of how far they had come. One evening, as the ship prepared for another journey, Jason called them to the shuttle bay. "Ready for your first official mission?" he asked. The twins nodded in unison. Jason grinned. "Then, let's see what the galaxy has in store for us." As the shuttle lifted from the bay, Lyra sat at the navigation console and Sarah at the sensors. Jason was at the helm, but this time the controls didn't feel like they belonged to him alone. Outside, the stars stretched ahead, endless, mysterious, and full of possibility. For the first time in their lives, the twins weren't just passengers on someone else's journey. They were going somewhere, together, as part of something bigger than themselves, and deep in their hearts, they knew they would never be left behind again.